Welcome to the Quotive Corner. Today's quote is from a painter, and it might be the most honest thing ever said about creative work, or any work for that matter. Inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us just show up and get to work. That's Chuck Close, one of the most celebrated and inventive American painters of the 20th century, best known for his monumental photorealistic portraits. He was born in 1940 and spent decades developing techniques that were entirely his own, using grids, Polaroids, and a systematic approach to building images that was as methodical as it was visually stunning. Then, in 1988, he suffered a rare spinal artery collapse that left him paralyzed from the neck down. He continued to paint. Using a brush-holding device strapped to his wrist and forearm, he kept working and kept producing extraordinary art. The quote comes from Inside the Painter's Studio, a book of artist interviews where Close described it as his guiding motto. The full passage he gave is worth hearing, because what starts as a sharp, memorable line opens into something considerably richer. Here is the full quote. Inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us just show up and get to work. If you wait around for the clouds to part and a bolt of lightning to strike you in the brain, you are not going to make an awful lot of work. All the best ideas come out of the process. They come out of the work itself. Things occur to you. If you're sitting around trying to dream up a great art idea, you can sit there a long time before anything happens. But if you just get to work, something will occur to you, and something else will occur to you, and something else that you reject will push you in another direction. Inspiration is absolutely unnecessary and somehow deceptive. You feel like you need this great idea before you can get down to work, and I find that's almost never the case. That last line is the one I want to stay with for a moment. Inspiration is absolutely unnecessary and somehow deceptive. Not just unhelpful, deceptive. Because what inspiration does, when you're waiting for it, is create the convincing illusion that the absence of inspiration is the reason the work isn't happening. It gives you a story to tell yourself, and to others, that sounds entirely reasonable. I just haven't felt inspired lately. I'm waiting for the right idea. I'll get back to it when I'm in the right headspace. The story is plausible. The story is also, in Close's view, almost entirely a fiction. The creative block, as most working artists and writers and makers eventually discover, is not primarily a problem of insufficient inspiration. It's a problem of insufficient proximity to the work. The ideas don't arrive before the work begins. They arrive because the work has begun. The process generates what the waiting was hoping to receive. You cannot think your way into a good painting. You paint your way into a good painting. And the painting that comes out of dedicated, uninspired showing up is often better, more surprising, more alive, than anything you could have planned from the outside. This is Chuck Close describing his own process, which was methodical to a degree that most people find almost counterintuitively unromantic. He didn't wait for inspiration to move him. He set up his grid. He picked up his brush, later his wrist-strapped device. He started in the upper left corner and worked his way across, square by square, cell by cell. The enormous, luminous, emotionally resonant portraits that emerged from this process were not the product of creative lightning strikes. They were the product of a man showing up every day and doing the next thing. In a past episode, I discussed how Anne Mulligan Smith told us that done is better than perfect. The anti-perfectionism argument for beginning rather than refining indefinitely. Zig Ziglar, in another episode, also gave us the anti-waiting argument. You don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. Close is making the anti-inspiration argument, the third variation on the same fundamental truth. Waiting for perfect, waiting for readiness, waiting for inspiration. Three different faces of the same avoidance. Three different ways of staying outside the work, rather than entering it. What makes Close's version particularly sharp is the word amateur. It's not a neutral descriptor. It's a gentle provocation. He's not saying inspiration doesn't exist. He's saying that treating it as a prerequisite is what distinguishes the people who make a lot of work from the people who don't. The amateur waits to feel something before they begin. The professional begins and trusts that something will come out of the beginning. The distinction isn't about talent. It's about relationship to the process. and the relationship Close is describing, the one that treats showing up as a fundamental discipline and inspiration as a pleasant byproduct rather than a required input, is one that most serious makers arrive at eventually, often after years of waiting for lightning that didn't come. The writer who sits down every morning whether they feel like it or not. The musician who practices scales on the days when music feels joyless. The painter who mixes colors and starts a canvas even when nothing feels alive. Not because inspiration can't show up. It does sometimes, and it's wonderful when it does, but because the work can't afford to wait for it. Close's biography gives this observation a weight that most productivity advice doesn't carry. He didn't just philosophize about showing up. He did it after a catastrophic physical event that would have ended most careers. The paralysis didn't end his. He adapted his tools, adapted his technique, and kept working. The body that had held the brush could no longer do so. He found another way to hold the brush. And the work continued. That's not inspiration. That's something harder and more durable than inspiration. It's the refusal to make the circumstances the reason the work doesn't happen. Now, let's consider the honest counterpoint, because I never skip it. Inspiration is not nothing. There are genuinely different qualities of creative energy. Days when the work flows almost effortlessly, and days when every word or brushstroke is a negotiation. Close isn't saying those differences don't exist. He's saying they don't get to be the determining factor in whether you work. But for some kinds of creative work, particularly work that involves genuine discovery rather than systematic execution, there is a real question of whether forced production in the complete absence of genuine engagement produces anything worth keeping. The first draft written on an uninspired Tuesday may need significantly more revision than the one written on a day when the energy was actually there. The key is understanding that the uninspired Tuesday still has to happen, both because something is almost always recoverable from it, and because the inspired day often follows directly from the uninspired one. Close also had the advantage of a highly systematic, methodical approach that may have been particularly well suited to uninspired execution. Not all creative disciplines work the same way. The core principle, show up, start the work, trust the process, translates broadly. The specific form it takes varies by person and practice. But the fundamental truth holds. The work is in the showing up. The ideas are in the doing. The bolt of lightning, when it comes to the person who was already at the workbench when it arrived. Thanks for spending a few minutes here at the Quotive Corner. If this one made you think of something you've been waiting to feel inspired about for longer than you'd care to admit, that's worth some honest consideration. And never forget, wisdom isn't in the quote, it's in the reflection. I'll see you in the next episode.